Welcome to the show. On March 9th, my guest was elected the student president of UCD, University College of Dublin in Ireland. And by late October, she was given the Golden Boot Award, the first student president to be impeached in UCD history. What did she do? What was her crime? What happened? We're going to tell you the whole story coming up straight ahead on this episode of The Patrick Coffin Show. Do not miss it. Welcome aboard. Thanks for hanging out. On this show, I interview sages and survivors of the culture war, and today's guest is definitely both a sage and a survivor. Katie Ascough is a freelance journalist and human rights activist with a background in medicinal chemistry from the University College of Dublin. And the farcical story of her impeachment as the student union president of UCD is only secondarily, I think, about abortion and the pro-life movement. Primarily, it's about the role of free speech and whether or not true diversity of opinion is permitted in the public square. It's also a cautionary tale of the mob mentality that can take over regarding media coverage. Katie is here to tell the whole story from the beginning up until now. Katie, thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you for having me, Patrick.
I've admired you from afar, and you're so kind, and you're always smiling. You know, I've watched a lot of footage of the other side, the people who gave you the Golden Boot Award, and they are a humorless lot. I don't ever want to be hugged by them or spend much time. They're just unremittingly humorless and uber serious. It's like, guys, can we just agree to disagree here? So let me before I ask anything else, were you offered support from pro-choice fellow students at UCD? Because this is not just an obvious black-hatted, white-hatted lineup, right?
No, absolutely not. I mean, from the moment I was elected, so it was really interesting if you just look at the reaction, I guess, to my election. There were a lot of pro-choice students who voted for me to be their president, and I really valued those students, and I had some amazing relationships with those students as well, and we'd have great conversations about where we disagreed and where we did agree on various different issues. But yes, there was a lot of support from the pro-choice students, both for my election and also in my impeachment. There was a mix of students. Of course, most pro-life students were electing me and voting to keep me in during the impeachment process. But there was a good group of pro-choice students as well. So,
well, this is the maddening part. Universities are supposed to be the exemplar of debate, where the marketplace of ideas is meant to have a free reign on, okay, you disagree, let me present your arguments, present your evidence. I want to hear your data. I want to hear your premises. In this case, it really seemed as an outsider, Katie, that some people already had targets on your back before you got elected. And this was like licking their chops. Finally, it's like they couldn't bring down Al Capone for killing people and being an evil, mobster, but they can get him on some tax law loophole that he'd violated.
Sure, yeah. I guess if you look at my election, about 5 minutes after I was elected, some students did start calling for my impeachment online. So they were citing my pro-life views as reason for my impeachment. So it was quite obvious that from day one, some students were looking for an opportunity to get me out, which I think is a sad thing because, there's over 30,000 students in UCD, and there's obviously going to be a lot of different opinions and people with different backgrounds. And I think that anybody should be allowed to run for the president of their own students' union, regardless of their opinion or their religious beliefs or whatever it is. Our diversity makes us who we are. So I ran for president, and I ran on a range of different issues. I ran on things like mental health, sexual consent, getting better food facilities on campus, all these different things. I was really passionate about my job, worked really hard over the 4 months that I was president. So I was working, late almost every day, doing everything I could to represent the students who elected me. But yeah, there was a group of students who from day one wanted me out. And only about, I think it was 2 weeks into semester one, I guess they found what they thought was their excuse to kick me out. And I'm sure we'll get to that later.
Yeah, we'll get to the smoking gun, the triggering incident that led to the impeachment. But I wanted to ask you about whether or not it's possible in a country like Ireland, which traditionally has been a bastion of common sense, no abortion. For the longest time, they were holdouts on divorce and the redefinition of marriage. And when I learned that, I believe it was 63% of the people who showed up for the vote a few years ago to redefine marriage, that was a real tectonic shift to me. But it also seemed to be a little bit misleading. I've spoken to some people in Ireland who told me that the no side, the people who were saddled with the negative message, right? No, don't vote for this, were outgunned financially. A lot of money poured in from other countries like the United States. And they were also fighting a brand war. It's so easy to get on board with yes. Yes has power behind it. It's energy, it's change. Hope and change sound familiar to American voters. But if you're saddled with a no, then you're like a stick in the mud. Then you're like a staunch conservative. It's harder to get your message out in that context where the opposition are so activist in the media. They're so willing and let's face it, effective in making that narrative the one that sticks. So is it possible for someone who's pro-life to run for any kind of office, whether in a university context or in the political sphere? Is it possible without being charged with what I call the EWPL crime, which is existing while pro-life?
I love that term. It does feel like it's definitely much more difficult for somebody who's pro-life to run for office. In fact, since my impeachment, I've seen a lot of people saying, how could a pro-life person ever run again? Because obviously I was kicked out and pro-life. So it's sad. I mean, that really shouldn't be the way, even for, people who might identify with the left or call themselves liberals. Mm-hmm. I would think that the most liberal thing would be for anyone to be able to run for a position in their college, in their country, whatever it is. I mean, it's not true freedom, really, of the truest sense. It's not true freedom to have that kind of boxing people into these different, you're pro-life, you go do your thing over there, and that's not right. I would hope and think that everybody could see that.
Well, it's also a sham to say that there's true diversity, because not all diversity is created equal, apparently. Some views you're just not allowed to express them, and you're certainly not allowed to live them. So let's get to what's called the smoking gun. For people who have no idea how things work on the UCD campus, there's a magazine for freshmen called Winging It?
Winging It UCD, yeah.
Okay, Winging It UCD. And for Americans listening and Canadians who've had abortion laws for a generation now, abortion is still, or advertising as to how to procure one is still on the books in Ireland rather, illegal, correct?
Yes, under certain circumstances, and basically it can be given out unsolicited, so you can't give it out to somebody without them knowing what they're receiving.
I see. And you spotted a violation of current law, according to what your solicitor told you, in this magazine, and it was too late to retract it, and you had to print out new things. I watched a lot of interview footage, man in the street from UCD TV, and talk about leading questions. Katie Ascough has ripped information from the brochure that you're paying for. Do you agree? No, it's terrible. And of course, it's not a party until someone compares you to Trump, right? Which some of them did.
Yes, from day one.
And I don't know how many people who supported you they edited out, but it seemed to me to be just a festival of social justice warriors on parade.
Yeah. And what's really, I think what happened a lot, especially with that video and other things, is people were very quick to say that they were ready to impeach me. It was almost like the popular thing to do, because there was such a, this craze and this hype and this go with the crowd mentality. And everybody was, impeach her, get her out. She's horrible. She's this, she's that. Yeah. And, I had some of my closest friends who were very pro-choice say to these people, have you ever met her? Have you ever had a conversation? Have you looked at her, her defense for what you're saying? Because some of the things being said were just so ridiculous. I think somebody asked me, did I cancel Christmas, which is an event that we hold close to Christmas. But I was like, no, I did not cancel Christmas. All these things were just being thrown around, and a lot of it was sticking with students. And there was just this, let's get Katie out kind of.
Burn the Grinch.
Yeah, lots of people called it a witch hunt. Wow. So I did dress up for a witch for Halloween, which I thought was
fantastic. Very good.
If anybody got onto that.
Well, one thing that I have to say I really admire about the way you took this is that early on, I mean, you must have felt terrible, embarrassing. What? Are you insane? This is a terrible mistake you're all making. But you actually pondered running again in the teeth of that, right? Because I love that punch back thing. So
yeah, I mean, I definitely considered it. I wasn't overly certain it was going to happen, but you know what? I ran for president and I was democratically elected, and I really did feel that I had earned my place at the table. I'd worked really, really hard, and I felt that I had proven myself during the 4 months of presidency to be a good president. And I had loads of ideas that I'd been working for months and months on, and I wanted to see them to fruition. I mean, they'd been begun. Over the summer, we do a lot of prepping. So I'd been inducted onto loads of different boards and committees. Mm-hmm. I'd read a lot of different documents. I'd set things up for several different projects. And I just wanted to keep going, because it was going really well, and we were making progress. We had some honestly groundbreaking progress on our student accommodation projects. We had secured private meetings with ministers, which is one of the first times our students' union had done this. And we've been promised government funding for some of our projects as well. It was insane. It was actually almost going too well. It was like something had to happen. I just didn't know it would be this big,
But for ministers, you mean the government officials?
Exactly.
Government reps. Okay, just from my American. I'm Canadian, so I'm the via media here between the UK and America. Why did you run? Because your platform sounds like very, very small. By small, I mean non-grandiose things like improving the food that we eat and the places that students have to stay. Obviously, you could never have predicted the firestorm that would come your way, but why did you decide to step into the public eye like this? With you didn't come from a whole line of political leaders in your family, I don't think, based on what I've
not at all. Engineers, doctors mostly.
Okay.
So it's a great question, and I actually ask myself the same question sometimes. So I think it's best to just kind of tell how it all started. Yeah. So I was in third year of studying medicinal chemistry in UCD. I was sitting on the fourth floor of the library, which is where all the hardcore library people tend to go. So there I was, supposed to be studying, but of course I was procrastinating a little bit. I was on Facebook, and I saw an ad about running. I can't
relate to that at all.
Never. I saw an ad about running for president of the Students' Union, and it was, I think, 2 or 3 days before nominations were closing. Mm-hmm. And I just decided to go for it because I had come into college in first year really, really eager to get involved in loads of different things. I tried out things like trampolining and dance, and I really did just want to throw myself into campus life. But then being in medicinal chemistry, my degree really just took over, and I kind of lived under a rock. I socialized too, but I definitely put most of my time into my studies, and I did well. I was happy that I did that. But when I saw this ad about running for president, I just wanted to get out of that comfort zone, I guess, and go for something a bit different. I'd been involved in a few campaigns on campus previous to that, and I thought I had what it takes. I thought I could be a good president. So that's how it all kind of kick-started. I remember calling up my mum and saying, "Mum, is this crazy to do?" And she said, "Yes, it is crazy, but if you want to, go for it." So I did. And honestly, with every day of campaigning, I just really fell in love with the role. I fell in love with students. I loved hearing everybody's different ideas of how we could make our college a better place. And I loved meeting, the different academics and staff members in the college to see how everything could work.
Yeah.
It just one thing after the next, it just all kind of lined up and it just happened. I mean, it was crazy. It was crazy.
I've read some of the things your enemies have said, that you pulled a switcheroo, that you're actually a mole for the pro-life movement, and your goal was to do a switcheroo and then to kind of foist your opinion on the entire student body, contrary to your promise to represent all of their views. How do you answer that objection?
I mean, all I can say is that it's simply not true. I mean, I was very upfront and honest I was asked so many times and in so many different ways during my campaign, how was I going to deal with the pro-choice mandate of the union? Because I was known quite well to be pro-life. I'd spoken up at debates. I had done some interviews with BBC and RTE and different media sources. But I was very, very clear, and I was very honest when I said, look, I personally won't be at the pro-choice rallies at the front waving a flag, because that's not what I believe in. And I would hope that we could all respect, that different people have different beliefs. But at the same time, I completely understand that the union is voted and mandated to be pro-choice. And I said that I would facilitate and just make sure that that mandate was upheld. There's 5 sabbatical officers, and the 5 of us really help run the union. It's a full-time job, and I spoke with those officers, and we worked out a system of delegation and how could it all work. And it was going really well. For 4 months, we had, a solid plan. Everything was ticking over. Not only ticking over, it was actually doing a lot better than it had ever done in some areas. So, of course, my view was not the same as the unions, but that's okay. We should be okay and comfortable with that, not so afraid of having different opinions.
How did the officers who worked closely with you, certainly more closely than the activists who were baying for your head, how did they react to the impeachment?
It's a good question, and it does break my heart, I guess, to talk about it, because I was so close with my teammates, and over the summer we got on really well. We went on a weekend away. It was really, really fun. We ended up staying an extra night because we were all getting on so well. These guys, they were really becoming like brothers to me. I really enjoyed spending time with them, and we did work well together. But what ended up happening was they, one by one, started also calling for my impeachment. And by the end of it, they had all come out campaigning to impeach me. And it honestly breaks my heart that it came to that. And I know it wasn't easy for them either. And I'm sure in their heads it was the right thing to do. And they had, their own reasons for doing what they did. But that was probably the most difficult part for me personally, to have that kind of, that dynamic. It was upsetting, to say the least.
I'm sure. I'm thinking of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, the James Stewart movie, where he's basically the only guy flopping upstream, toward common sense and toward the truth. Because you never hid your views. You never kind of pulled a fast one and came out after the election. Oh, and now I'm going to use the student union as my pro-life instrument of terror.
No way. I would say any student who was very into the abortion issue knew I was pro-life before I even began to run. And once my campaign kicked off, I was asked again and again by student papers, at Hustings, which is the big debate. Even in one of the college papers, they had my title, I guess, as the pro-life candidate, even though I said I wasn't the pro-life candidate. I wasn't running on that platform specifically. But anyway, yes, people did make a big deal that, I was pro-life, and I never did that.
Well, in our discourse today, we need slogans. We need labels that stick like Velcro. And if you say it 10,000 times, all the better, because you can't unstick a label like that once it gets repeated so often from so many different areas. For listeners who don't realize the history or the importance of UCD, it is a world-class university. It's top 200 in the world. Gerard Manley Hopkins taught Greek and Latin there. I believe Oscar Wilde attended there for a time. James Joyce. Blessed John Henry Cardinal Newman was the first rector, I want to say, in the 1850s. So this is not a provincial college or, sort of tucked away. This is very much in the center of Irish life. Everyone born and raised in the UK knows about UCD, correct?
Exactly. It's the biggest college in Ireland as well. We have over 30,000 students, which is considerably more than other colleges here.
Just to touch on your pro-life stance for a moment, you were raised with the presupposition that human life is inherently valuable, and it doesn't matter your state, whether you're in the womb or whether you live outside. But you also had a personal experience with your sibling I read about when your mother had a miscarriage. Can you share that anecdote, Katie?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you said, I was always pro-life. I always believed that everybody has the right to live, whether they're born, unborn, and no matter what their size. But I did have an experience when I was 15 years old. So my mum had a miscarriage and delivered the baby at home, and I got an opportunity to meet him. His name was Lawrence. He was about 13 weeks developed.
13 weeks. Lawrence with a W or an A?
A W.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I got to hold him in my hand, and I remember he fit just into the palm of my hand, and I'll never forget the those moments that I had with him. So looking into his face, at just 13 weeks, he had eyes, ears, a nose, and a mouth, and I couldn't believe it. I knew in my head that at 13 weeks they're probably quite well formed, but I just couldn't imagine the level of detail that he had. I remember the two features that really stood out to me were his ear. So his ear had every single crease that my ear would have. It
Yeah.
really did look so perfectly formed. It was just really, really small. And I also remember his hands very well. He had fingernails on his hands. He
Amazing.
also creases on his knuckles, like that kind of detail. I just was not expecting to see on a 13-week developed baby. And for it to be my brother, it was just such an incredible experience, and I'll never ever forget it. And I knew from that moment onwards, I knew not only definitely was I pro-life, but I was going to be actively pro-life. I wasn't going to sit in the backseat on this issue. I was going to, do my part to make sure that these children are protected, because they're so delicate, they're so vulnerable, and they literally are the most voiceless in our society, and they need us to speak up for them, otherwise they won't get heard. So that was my experience.
Do you believe that there's a silent majority in Ireland and elsewhere that just don't want the label pro-life activists? They don't want to be publicly shellacked as pro-lifers tend to be in the media and by friends and so on. There's a kind of a shaming that goes on. But I think part of this is driven, you can agree or disagree, part of it is rooted in a general ignorance about what an abortion is. We're all opposed to slavery because we can see it. We know what slavery is. It's the ownership of another human being, which is obviously unnatural and sinful and a crime. But when it comes to abortion, the ground is quickly shifted to rhetoric like woman's right to choose and product of conception, and people trundle out all these euphemisms which are designed to change the topic and kind of keep our eyes off the ball. Do you think that people simply don't know what an abortion is, the different methods and how brutal it is?
Definitely. Actually, I recently gave a talk along those lines of how abortion, the other side, the people who are for abortion, they use these words that I can't fathom in my mind how they use these words to describe an abortion, juxtaposing these words to my experience with my little brother. It just really doesn't make sense. So the word choice, to say that it's a choice to end someone's life, like, I just don't think people are thinking that through. It's not a choice about what you're having for breakfast or where you're going on holidays. This is ending someone's life that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So to say that that's a choice really doesn't make sense to me. Also, the word healthcare, I get really hung up on this word.
Oh, yes.
That say healthcare. Looking at my baby brother, to say that ending his life is healthcare, that just really disturbs me, actually, I must say. So yes, I definitely think that people don't connect the words with what exactly is going on. And lots of people don't know what an abortion entails either. So I think it would be great if we could have more discussion, more open and honest discussion on this issue. And you're also saying about a silent majority. I can definitely tell you I've met a lot of people who are pro-life, but just don't want to speak up about it. I'll never forget the morning of the vote in UCD, and my vote wasn't to do with, being pro-choice or pro-life. Pro-choice people voted for me too, but I'll never forget the student who came up to me really earnestly, just looked me in the eyes and said, "I'm pro-life and I don't speak up about it. But for the first time, I feel like my voice is being heard through you."
Wow.
And that just made my world. I was like, look, I can take whatever amount of hate on Twitter that you want to throw at me. If, I can be a voice for someone like that, that makes it also worth it. So there are a lot of people who are pro-life and are just, it can be paralyzing sometimes, the fear that comes over you, because when everybody's shouting these pro-choice slogans and you feel like you'll be ousted from your friend group or your class or your
presidency,
it can be a little bit scary, and that's not healthy. I just really hope we can break that stigma.
How do you deal with fear?
Fear of spiders or
The spiders. Tech glitches, losing your
Yes.
presidency. Because my conviction here is that the brave, people who have courage, are not people who are fearless. They're people who feel fear and do the right thing anyway. Does that resonate with you?
That definitely resonates. To tell the truth, I had quite a few days, not too many, but I had a few days where I didn't want to leave the house. I felt so sick to my stomach reading the things that were being said about me online.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I was being called every name under the sun. And what frustrated me, not even frustrated me, just saddened me and disappointed me the most was when people would go after my friends and family. So
Yep.
people in my literature were being mocked at, people in my family were being called awful things. And that really made me not feel so great. So there were some days when I really could have been out campaigning and asking people to vote no to my impeachment, but I was just a little bit, I needed a home day. So
Sure.
There were some days like that. But how did I deal with it? How did I deal with the fear? Support. There was I just can't even tell you how much support there was for me from my family, my friends, people I didn't even know.
Mm-hmm.
I still have hundreds of messages to get back to. So many people reaching out and sending their love, sending their support. And that gave me a lot of strength and a lot of courage. And also prayers. I had a lot of families praying for me. There were massive group chats, people doing novenas and offering up masses and all these different things. So there were some definitive moments where I knew I was getting strength that was not my own.
Mm-hmm.
There was just strength that was coming that I can't even explain, because I really would have thought that I would have broken down in some of these moments. But honestly, it must have been the support and the prayers from my family and friends.
Well, a man by the name of Jesus Christ, who founded baptism, put in the small print, the world hates me. This is not just a, Hebrew hyperbole. And if you want to follow him, you're going to be hated. You've been on the business end of a lot of hate, Katie. None of it's rational, because they've obviously, your enemies who are the angriest and the loudest, the social justice warriors who, go on Facebook and Twitter with fake names and just kind of launch their missiles. They're cowards. They don't want to have a conversation in which you get down to first principles. So they have these, the standard bumper sticker slogans. Just to go back briefly to pro-choice, what you said really struck me, that pro-choice is a brilliant sounding slogan, but it's an incomplete sentence. Finish it. Show us where the spear's landing here. Pro-choice to what? And that's when the topic gets changed. And they try, they bring in a new cliche.
No, you're so right.
Just since I know you're a practicing and proud nerd because of the number of days you've spent in the library, in America in 1965 there was a Supreme Court decision called Griswold versus Connecticut. I write about this in my book Sexo Naturale on the church's teaching on contraception. And Griswold versus Connecticut found for the very first time in U.S. jurisprudence history a right to privacy. It's not in the Constitution, it's not in the Bill of Rights, but their justices said in Roe v. Wade in 1973 that the right to privacy is a penumbra. The penumbra is the word to describe the glow of the sun behind the moon during a solar eclipse. Now, this sounds sci-fi and strange, except that it's the law. It's the reason why we have, or one of the reasons why we have Roe v. Wade, the pro-choice law here in America. In 1973 in Ireland, there was a decision called Magee versus Attorney General, which found something rather similar. I keep reading about this Magee decision in 1973, which also relates to a right to privacy. You see that there's a kind of a parallel there.
Interesting. I'm not fully briefed on the Irish case, but of course we are well aware of the Roe versus Wade case here in Ireland.
Yeah, I think it's one of those unknown, kind of subsurface things that people don't advert to. And very few people were paying attention in 1965 here when Griswold versus Connecticut was passed as well. But I'm bringing it up for a reason, and that is the Eighth Amendment debate in Ireland. What is the Eighth Amendment to the Irish Constitution all about for folks? What's the kind of compressed version, and what's at stake there?
Sure. So the Eighth Amendment, it's an amendment to the Irish Constitution, and it essentially provides the right to life to the unborn. So it says that as far as is practicable, the life of the unborn child should be saved, and that the life of the mother holds equal rights. So this is the part of our constitution that pro-choice advocates are very adamant to have chucked out. And Ireland is currently undergoing a process to have a referendum. So there was a citizens' assembly, which we had, and that was I could go into the details, but anyway, what we have now after the citizens is the Oireachtas Committee, and they're actually issuing their final report on Wednesday, the 20th of December. So this committee, it's been quite biased. It's quite disappointing to see how it's been conducted. There was one stage when there were 24 pro-repeal people or witnesses that were invited in to speak, and there were only 4 pro-life advocates that were invited in to speak. So 24 to 4 is obviously not very balanced at all. And there's several other things as well with this committee that have just been really disappointing. So this committee is basically set up to decide the wording of the referendum, and it's likely this referendum on the 8th Amendment will occur in Ireland in May 2018. So that's
May 2018. Okay, something to pray for, because it goes back to the phrasing of that narrative, doesn't it? Even the way it's being couched already, pro-repeal. I don't want to be anti. I want to be pro. I want to be on the yes. I want to be on the yes team. Yes, yes, we can.
I know it sounds great, but I mean, at the bottom of it, what are we really talking about? We're talking about yes to ending lives. That slogan does not sound so great, and that's what we're going to have to just really talk about over the next few months.
Do you think that the UCD is a microcosm of Ireland and other countries generally from this point of view? 32,000 or so students there. Only a few thousand showed up to vote to impeach. Do you think there's something analogical with Irish society? If more people on the side of life got involved, they don't have to wave placards, they don't have to show up to, walk around with clipboards and be with bullhorns. But if more people saw what's at stake and saw the word games and the euphemisms, is this amendment safe? As long as people, talk about the silent majority, they need to get off their couch. They need to put down Twitter for 5 minutes and kind of wake up a little bit. Isn't that the answer? To get the silent majority to be a heard and seen majority?
Definitely. I think we can learn a lot from UCD. I will say I do think it's a bit of an exaggerated version of the larger context of Ireland in UCD. So I don't think it's an exact, example, but I think there's a lot we can learn. And yes, you're definitely right. There's such a need for people to vote on this. This is one of the most important votes Ireland will ever have. It's a vote about the right to people's right to live. So you can't get much more important than that. And there are a lot of people we've seen who kind of want to take a step back from this whole debate. It makes them uncomfortable. And, it should. It's an important and serious issue. And there's a lot at stake. But people need to get engaged in this. And, they need to ask questions. They need to be open and not just kind of accept what might be cool or what might be trending. And I do feel that's kind of what happened in UCD. But I think if we can take what happened in UCD and learn from it and not let that happen again, not go with the crowd, but rather have an open discussion and fair debate, and not have the case where college papers are writing articles 10 to 1 against you. If we can have not that, I think it would be really good for our country to have this discussion and to keep our 8th Amendment.
Do you say it's exaggerated because the average European or Canadian or American college campus is such an incubator for bad ideas? There's a built-in left-wing bias in every major university. I know UCD has a backdrop of having some kind of Catholic identity, but certainly not immune to this activist, radical ethos where people come in from all kinds of backgrounds and they get put into the sausage machine and they come out sounding like lemmings. All the people who were against you, they sounded like versions of the previous person, just with the same kind of empty cliches and not really knowing why they were voting the way they were voting. that's kind of lemming mob mentality. Are you saying it's exaggerated because it's a college context, and you'd expect someone like you to have some pushback and opposition anyway?
Sure. I mean, college campuses are an interesting place, right? College can be a difficult time. Everybody's coming here, and everybody wants to be accepted and make friends and just get on with it. It can be a difficult time, and I get that. I was a first year only a couple of years ago, but there does tend to be this let's all think together. This herd mentality tends to happen, and sometimes you might not even notice it. But I'll never forget. Again, I've learned so much from these different campaigns. I'll never forget. Several students came up to me in a group, and they wanted to talk to me. Well, actually, I think I stopped them because I don't think they wanted to talk to me at first. But I asked them, hey, what way do you think you're going to vote? And they literally said, oh, I was thinking of going with the crowd and voting yes. I don't think they had quite realized who I was yet, that it was my impeachment we were talking about. They're like, yeah, we're just going to go with the crowd and vote yes. And I said, oh, I have a few ideas for why you should vote no. Could you listen to them? And, I'm Katie, by the way. Nice to meet you. And after... awkward. And
wow.
After a conversation, a lot of people would say, oh, you know what, I'm going to think twice, or I'm going to come back because I actually don't know what to do now. I'm thinking quite differently. So I think, people tend to go with what is easy, I guess, what is default.
Yeah. And there it is again. You represented no. Rather than why wasn't it the yes, she should stay vote, right?
Yeah, I know. Well, that's to do with they ran the petition to get the referendum, so they got their wording the way they signed it or whatever. But yeah, it's funny.
There's been a real a shift in the perception of millennials toward Irish culture in its the long shadow of the Catholic heritage in Ireland. I was in Ireland 2 years ago, and I spent a lot of time in pubs. I was part of a pilgrimage. My wife and I lead pilgrimages, and I found myself in a pub in Galway, which is a blast and a half. Reminded me of Halifax, my hometown, where there's Irish and Scottish music playing live, and people have a great time. And it's almost like a substitute church in a way. People go there to disclose their secrets and have fellowship and community. And there's one law student there. His name's Andrew. I won't tell you much more about him, but he's a very, very sharp guy. Left the church, made no bones about it. But in a moment of honesty, he said, Patrick, here in Ireland, my generation are out from under the authority of the Catholic Church, but we don't know whose authority we're under right now. So there's kind of an interim no man's land, now what? Which I take as a great opportunity for evangelization.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's no joke to be made that the Catholic Church, and definitely the Catholic Church in Ireland, has made massive mistakes in the past, and they've been exposed and maybe put under a magnifying glass, and a lot of people have rebelled against that, and a lot of it was really bad. And I think it's great that the church is now fixing a lot of those problems and putting in regulations so that don't happen again. And I see the church moving in a very good direction internally. It's getting a lot better. But we have lost a lot of followers, and a lot of people aren't attending church anymore. But there is an amazing community. There are some incredible people here in Ireland, and I have the pleasure of knowing a lot of them. We have prayer groups, and we have really big retreats throughout the year. If I can name one, Youth 2000, they are incredible. They have a summer festival or a summer retreat. It feels more like a festival sometimes. In the summer, and there's over 1,000 young Irish Catholics that come together and celebrate their faith, and we listen to talks, and we just get to know each other. It's really, really great. And we do the same at Christmas, which just happened a couple of weekends ago. So there is something, they're really, like, the Catholic Church is not dead here in Ireland, not at all. But it needed a bit of help. So hopefully now that things are getting better, we'll see more people returning.
Well, there's a Chinese word. The Chinese word for crisis is danger and chance. So there's two ways to look at this, at the scandal and poor leadership in the church. And I think the positive way is to see it as the dross is being purged. There's a purification going on, and people are being invited to ask, who are you and who do you belong to? Do you belong to Christ, or do you belong to a political party? What's your first loyalty? Who's the deepest you within you? And before that, I think people were kind of what I would call mechanical Mikes, just kind of ticking the box. Yeah, I went to church, wrote the check to Father, went to the the pancake breakfast, but really it wasn't a conversion of life and of priorities and values. Katie, would you do it all over again?
Absolutely. I mean, I think running for president was one of the boldest and best things I've ever done, and I really enjoyed every moment of my few months as president and running up to presidency. And as for the impeachment and all that happened there, I mean, I really do feel, I did what I thought I needed to do. I did the best that I could in the circumstances that I was given. And I'm just really looking forward to using what I learned moving forward now.
Are you going to announce right now that you're running for TSIC, for Prime Minister? You're running, aren't you? You don't deny it, Katie. Denial is not just a river in Egypt.
I see people say I should do that.
I'm not surprised.
But no, that is not the current plan.
Do you hear that, ladies and gentlemen? She said not the current plan. Okay. Now, I understand you have a book in the works, and you have so many lessons to impart, Katie. In a very short amount of time, you've been given an extraordinary amount of gold to mine and distill and to share.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really would love to write about my experiences, whether it be in a blog or who knows what it'll be. I haven't quite confirmed exactly what that will look like yet. But I'm busy away. I'm looking to move into freelance journalism. Mm-hmm. That's my area where I'm very passionate and I love to get to work. And I'm also going to be campaigning to retain the Eighth Amendment. Yep. It's an important year for that issue. So hopefully we'll have loads of people joining us, and it's going to be a busy and tumultuous year, but I'm really hoping we get a positive result.
Great. One of my jobs in life is to connect people. Do you happen to know Stephanie Gray from Canada?
Stephanie Gray. Oh, okay. That sounds so familiar.
Yeah, Stephanie Gray wrote Love Unleashes Life. She is a stupendously persuasive, beautiful, intelligent Canadian woman who's a pro-life advocate, and I've learned so much from Stephanie. You can Google her. I'll set you two up. You'll be fast friends. I guarantee it. And I'd love to come to Ireland. I want to speak there and other parts of the UK for the 50th anniversary of Humanae Vitae, which is the taproot of all of this. The role of love and life and sex and marriage and permanence and the stability that has brought us here for millennia. It's all starting. Doesn't it feel like it's all starting to come unglued in a certain way? There's a kind of a wilderness thing in the air.
Definitely. Well, we'd love to have you here in Ireland. Let us know when you're in Dublin.
Okay, will do. Well, Katie Ascough, I really appreciate your time. I wish more people who stand up and receive pushback and rejection and outright hate had half your level of grace under pressure and kindness. So thanks for being a role model, and thanks for your gift and all your work. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Patrick.
Okay, this is The Patrick Coffin Show. You can find out more information about what Katie's up to and some backstory at patrickcoffin.media. This is The Patrick Coffin Show. Be a saint. What else is there?